And welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we have a great interview with the guys at the Independent Picture House here in Charlotte. Got Bradley Ritter and Jay. Am I saying it right? Morong or Morong?
Morong's good, yeah.
Morong. Okay, gotcha. I but I definitely want to just thank you guys for taking the time for being here, and and you guys actually had a pretty busy schedule recently. Y'all were up in Toronto for the film festival, right?
Yes, yeah, we just got back last night, which would have been Thursday.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
So what were y'all doing in Toronto?
just watching lots of film. Seen what one does at a film festival, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
no,
true.
we I think Jay and I each did around upper 30s as far as how many films we watched, and yeah, just going from screening to screening. My eyes are still bloodshot from lack of sleep and staring at a screen for many hours a day. So,
But I'm sure you were able to walk away with an appreciation of a lot of the films that were shown at that festival, right?
yeah, no, it's a great festival every year. I actually was in Telluride right before that, so that really helped me with my Toronto schedule because I was able to see a lot of the stuff that was playing at both festivals at Telluride as well. So that freed me up to see quite a bit of film that I refer to them as the smaller type films that need a lot of love when we bring them to town, because a lot of people, they're flying under people's radar. So, and those I think are the type of films that I know I gravitate to, and I believe Jay does as well.
Gotcha. So for those watching or listening to the podcast here, can you tell me a little bit about yourselves and how you got involved in this kind of work? I mean,
Uh,
either one of you can start. It
yeah, I
doesn't
guess
matter.
I'll start, and then Jay can take over. I started as a projectionist at the Manor Theater back in, I believe it was either 1993 or 94. So, been there quite a while. I was the person that closed the Manor Theater down during COVID, when it was decided that they were not going to reopen no matter when, we came out of the pandemic. So
Mhm.
I was the person that turned the key over to the landlord. So started as a projectionist, became lead projectionist, and then assistant manager, and then I became the general manager in October of 1999, and up until it officially closed. And having spent so many years there, Jay and I and the Charlotte Film Society knew that there's a need for an independent cinema in Charlotte. Now that the Manor closed, and then prior to that, Ballantyne Village closed, and then Park Terrace went from a art house type screen cinema to mainstream once it switched from Regal to AMC. So
Yeah, that's right. I
yeah,
remember that.
yeah. So we went from 13 screens dedicated to art house down to 0 in, gosh, I think it was like less than 2 years. So always knew that there was a need in Charlotte. Charlotte's at the time was the 15th largest city in the United States, and the only one that would not have an art house when things opened back up after the pandemic. So, and Jay and I mean, shoot, we'd drive around town and look at empty buildings and say, oh man, that would make a great movie theater. So, I mean, the seed has been planted for a long time. But again, once the need was there, we jumped on it, and couldn't have turned out better so far.
Yeah. I remember as a kid driving down Providence Road on my way to the doctors, and we passed the Manor Theater, And I always said I've always wanted to go inside and see a movie. That never happened. And when I heard that they closed the doors, I just felt like someone stuck a knife in my heart and twisted, because I was like, wow, I'm really never gonna fulfill that wish now. So so that is really, really sad. And I used to go to that movie theater, the Park Terrace, as a kid.
Mhm.
And when I heard that they were closing it down, I think I remember there was a petition that was going around on the internet, and I signed it. And after I signed it, I was like, you know what? I've got a pretty good feeling. Like, I had a feeling in my gut that was telling me, you know what, this is going to succeed. They're going to keep it. But when I heard that they were closing it down for good, I was like, oh, like, I guess that signature was for nothing, really. And it kind of made me a bit pessimistic about that, because, like, I felt like I felt like Charlotte just decided, you know what, the art house theater, we just don't need it. I mean, we've already got AMC and Regal Cinemas and everything. What do we need with that? So I'm really, really glad to see that that the Independent Picture House is carrying on that torch. Now I wanted to ask you, and this might sound like a totally dumb question. Is the International Picture House like the successor to the Manor House Theater?
Well, why don't we let Jay introduce himself and he can answer.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about Jay. So sorry.
Well, again, I fill in the cracks when needed. So, it's a silent type, as they say. Well, I guess for that question, I mean, I would argue that it fills the Independent Picture House fills some part of the void left by the closing of the Manor Theater, but
Mhm.
this really is kind of it, it's an amalgam of a lot of different things. It's an amalgam of the Charlotte Film Society and the many different versions that's had over the 40-year existence. It's an amalgam of the different type of art house theaters, because there was a time in Charlotte when the Manor wasn't the art house theater and the Visualite was the art house theater. There was a time when the Manor was doing art house and Ballantyne Village was doing art house, and it was different art house than the Manor was doing. So, and then also it is just kind of a like I said, an amalgam of the idea that, I came from the Boston area when I moved down here in the mid 2000s. And, up there we had repertory theater houses like the Brattle Theater. We had really awesome educational film houses like the Harvard Film Archive. There were lots of different other movie theaters that were independent, that were doing not just screenings of movies, but talkbacks and just kind of educational programming. And so, so to me, coming from the Boston area with some of that stuff, my love of film, coming to Charlotte and basically asking, like, where's the cool movie theater to work at when I needed a job? And everyone was like, the Manor, you got to go to the Manor.
Yeah.
And the Manor always felt, for people in Charlotte, even though it was run by a chain, it felt like a mom and pop theater, because people like Brad and Brandy, who and others who were basically had been working there forever. People have been going there for years, and they were the only people they saw, and they thought, Brad owned the place. So I think the
Right.
Independent Picture House was really just kind of an amalgam of like all of these different kind of things that other cities have. You go to New York, there's a repertory theater. There's a really small, independent art house theater that just shows like foreign films. They don't even show, American movies.
Right.
Then there's the mixture ones like the Manor that'll show old, restorations, but then they'll show the new Wes Anderson movie, and then they'll show a small film from New Zealand, right? And it would be at the height, I think that's, what the Manor was doing the best, is when you would have like 2 movies playing at the Manor, or maybe 3, and one of them, maybe 2 of them, was like very clearly like a movie as everyone had heard of, and then a movie that no one had heard of, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the independent picture house in a nutshell, for me at least. And I think for most people, including Brad, where it's like, we weren't trying to recreate the Manor. We weren't trying to recreate any of these things. We were trying to sort of take what we knew existed in this city and really around the country and the world, and trying to say, like, how can we actually build something that does all of this stuff and not just shows, the big 5 art house movies every year. And so I think that's what we were trying to do as a group of people, is how do we take the best of the history of art house cinema in Charlotte, and the history of art house cinema as it has existed, really for the last 40 or 50 years in the United States, but even going back to like the 60s, right? Trying to find those little pockets. So that would, I don't know if that's a helpful answer, but that, at least to me, is my kind of feeling of what we were trying to do. And while we love the Manor and we want to, we have the popcorn machine from the Manor in our independent picture house, we weren't trying to just recreate the Manor because people felt nostalgic for, this really great theater where they saw Fantasia back in, 1952 or something like that,
Right. 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 So you're trying to create something, something that was unique, and individual, right?
Yeah, and I'd expand upon what Jay just said, and I mean, it's very important that we are a community cinema. We we just don't want to sell tickets and popcorn. We want to engage the community in these thought-provoking films and offer talkbacks and bring in the director of, some of these films. And I think that's something that Charlotte's never had. And, Jay, being the creative director programmer, has done a very good job, a great job in putting together events like that.
So, so before we go any further, for the average layman, can you can you define what is an art house film? Just so anybody who's listening is going to sit there and scratch their head and be like, what the heck are these guys talking about here?
That's a moving target these days. Jay, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to say the exact same thing in terms of the moving target element of it. I think the way that we talk about art house cinema is we're really just talking about films that are outside the mainstream of the major studios. And that could mean that they're released by smaller distributors, that their budgets are incredibly small. Foreign cinema has always kind of been lumped into the art house cinema category, because the idea of foreign cinema being something that people don't engage with as much as the Indiana Jones or the Star Wars or that kind of stuff. So that's always been how, or I think especially now, how art house is defined, is it's sort of the films that are outside your kind of traditional multiplex, major studio, tentpole movies that, don't get the marketing budgets of a couple $100 million, or don't necessarily have, the release on 4,000 screens, that kind of thing. I mean, and that's why it is a moving target, because it's always kind of been anything that sort of falls outside of that, but at what level and where, sometimes people use art house cinema and independent cinema sort of synonymously.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that too, if the two terms can sort of, be synonymous with or analogous with each other.
Yeah, I mean, they tend to be used interchangeably. But again, I mean, there's like, it's complicated, because a movie like Asteroid City Is that
Mhm.
is that an independent film, or is that a, and it becomes complicated in terms of like how people, and I think the idea is people will call something like that an independent movie because it wasn't made for over $100 million. It wasn't released on 4,000 screens, and it wasn't put out by a major studio, even though the film is, directed by a very well-known and solidified director. It has, arguably some of the biggest movie stars in the world in it, Scarlett Johansson and Tom Hanks, and so.
Mhm.
But the idea is it still falls under that realm of the art house independent because a studio didn't make that movie, and they're not putting it out in 4,000 screens to make, trying to make $1 billion. Someone made it for a smaller amount of money, and they're trying to, double or triple their investment, and that's about it. So that's why art house and independent has always kind of been this, kind of, again, sort of interchangeable terms. And then the foreign film, element of that tends to then fall under that as well, because it's the same principle. The big chain theaters, because they're trying to just, for lack of a better word, make money.
Mhm.
They can't afford to put a small foreign film in, because they just know whatever the movie is, it's not going to make even what a small, lower budgeted studio horror film would make, right? A small movie like Talk to Me or something. Well, I guess that is a foreign film technically, because it was an Australian film. So never mind. Everything I just said was wrong.
Another perfect example of that is Parasite, right? When that came out, we had the Charlotte premiere of that through our Charlotte Film Festival.
Mhm.
And back then we were at the Manor. The Manor opened that. I don't remember how many screens it opened on, but it was probably no more than 2 or 3. And then, after it gets all the Oscar nominations, all of a sudden, the big movie theater chains, they're re-releasing it in, every movie theater, trying to make a quick buck on it. Whereas, we cultivated that release and did very well at the Banner with it. And I think we were still playing it when they re-released it, on a wider scale.
Right. So with the art house film, and it's basically about, trying to create like a level of appreciation for the art and the aesthetic, as opposed to just seeing as a, as a cash cow, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it's necessary, because I think, the thing we always get into is when you say art house, that it has a certain air of sort of like, and I hate this term, but I'll use it. It has a certain air of like high art, right? It has
Yeah,
that
that's
sort of
that's the connotation that you think of
but
automatically.
but it's not. It's just sort of saying the art house is like, I mean, cultivating might be a good word. I like the word curating. That's the word I like to use. The art house theater curates cinema, and is about like the idea of this is a good movie, or we think this is a good movie, or we think this is a movie that people will enjoy or get something out of, regardless of whether or not we think it's going to be a commercially successful thing. And
Hmm.
because and I think that's a really important element, because some of the most important art house cinema that we can even think of, like going back to like the 70s, were midnight movies that played at places like, the Elgin Theater in New York with, John Waters stuff, or Jodorowsky films, or, Eraserhead, or but the idea was these are just and again, they might have artistry to them, but they're not all, John Waters films weren't considered art, high art films, right? They're in some ways considered the lowest art cinema there is, right? Because he traverses in perversion and, grotesqueness and all these kind of things. But the point is that people seeing past, like, whether or not it is high or low, it is valuable as an artistic commodity, right? It's
Hmm.
valuable as a piece of work, and it will create some kind of enjoyment, some kind of fun, some kind of thought-provoking nature, or something else. And I think that's where the real nature of sort of having what I think we were all trying to do with the fact that we lost all of our art house cinemas is, where are people going to be able to go to experience something with their community that's outside of the mainstream? So the idea is, how are people going to sit and engage with something that might be incredibly fun and goofy and weird, or it could be incredibly thought-provoking and powerful, but they can do it together with people? When, you know, the big theaters, predominantly the idea is, well, you can go experience the big popcorn movie and have the fun experience of that, but you're not getting any of the other things around it. So I think that's, again, the complicated nature of the art house thing. And, you know, Parasite's a great example too, because the other thing that's so important about Parasite that I think sometimes people even forget is, like, that movie did get re-released and it came out on a budget, but that movie made $50 million at the US box office, which again is, like, my point is, like, that's, you know, these, you know, smaller Blumhouse throwaway horror movies make $50 million at the box office.
Right.
And so I think that's the point is that, like, you need the space, or you need the spaces. And this is true of all art forms, right? You know, it's like, you know, the Spectrum Arena in Charlotte is going to have the Eagle, but you need the small hole in the ground music venue, you know, I don't know, a Tommy's Pub or something, for the indie rock band to have a show to play for 25 people. You have to have both, because if you only have spaces that cater to the most well-known of the well-known and the things that will generate the money, then what you do is you become sort of you know, you have a huge artistic hole in your community of voices and ideas and thoughts and humor and all these kind of things. So I know I'm ranting a little bit, but
no, that's fine. That's totally fine. That actually does lead me to my. Oh, sorry, Bradley.
Well, I was just going to interrupt real quick. Just that I have to put my executive director hat on here and say exactly, piggybacking on what Jay just said. That's why it's important that we are a nonprofit, so we can. I mean, ticket sales, popcorn, again, are awesome, but please support us through a membership, through donation, so we can expand upon the programming side of it, like Jay just described.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely, because because it's just so easy to forget that, you know, you guys exist, that there's an independent side to the commercial side. I'm guilty of that. I will be the first to admit. So it's definitely something that that we need to be reminded of time and time again. You know, it reminds me of how 20 or 30 years ago there used to be a lot of independent bookshops in the Charlotte area. And I remember I used to, at that time, it was called Little Professors. Now it's Park Road Books. But at the time, at the time, like, my parents would take me to all these different bookstores, and I would just pick up all these books, and slowly they all began to close shop one by one, until finally, I think by the time the pandemic hit, I think we were down to like 5 or 6 independent bookshops. And I think a few more kind of closed after that. So, I could definitely understand where y'all are coming from, because I mean, to say that it's important to maintain the art house theater is a bit of an understatement. Would you say?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. And again, I think also too, though, to use your bookstore example, is it's not just important to have the art house theater, but or the art house, whatever, the independent music venue, the small theater company that's not bringing the Broadway shows. And again, we're talking about movies, so we're talking about having a space to have. It's having a space that is run and is basically kind of owned by the city, by the community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really important thing with the Independent Picture House. It's sort of like, as a nonprofit, it's not a corporation. It's a group of people who live and work and are part of the Charlotte community, who sit on a board and navigate through what do we want this to be for the community of Charlotte, and then hiring people in from the community of Charlotte that are directly talking with the community who's coming in and seeing this stuff, and actually engaging with them and getting that feedback. And then again, as Brad said, you have a membership where then again, any place that has a membership, you have to talk with your membership, right? The membership is going to tell you what you're doing right, what you're doing that they don't like you're doing. They're going to give you that feedback. And if you actually believe in the idea of having a community space, you're going to listen to them and you're going to say, oh, okay, we didn't know you enjoyed small finish films. We'll bring more of those.
Right.
And again, Brad, I say that because Brad and I wish and hope one day that we have a large group of people in our community that just want to watch small finish films, because we watch a lot of them and we love them, and we want to desperately show them to people. So,
I mean, Sisu came out recently, so.
What's that?
I was gonna say Sisu came out recently, so.
Yeah, but again, I mean, that's one of those movies that, and again, I want to be, this is complicated because I don't have, but that's one of those movies that, because it got picked up by a certain distributor and it just, and some of the major theaters they just needed content. That movie gets thrown into theaters and it comes and goes like on a blip. And there's an argument to be made that movie probably would have been better served at art house theaters.
Right.
People who maybe showed the director's other films, who have engaged with that director's work for many, many, many years, not just with a trying to, I don't want to say trick people, but like, hey, it's John Wick, but with Nazis, right? Hey, have fun. And I think that's what I'm saying is like, at the end of the day, sometimes it's just about the corporate chains. They just need something to fill a screen. And in a way that we might be getting too much insider baseball here, but that can also it can get in the way of what's saying like, well, as a small group with members, we might be able to do better with a film like that than if you throw it on 20 screens in town in all the major, Regals and AMCs, because we have an audience we can talk to, and we have an audience we can pitch that to and explain to them why they want to see it, as opposed to, again, you might have saw a trailer and said, oh, I want to see that movie. But most people, again, that's one of those films, it played in probably on more screens than it should have. And at the end of the day, while it made some money, I mean, if that thing made more than $10 million, I'd be shocked. And so that becomes the thing, right? It just becomes this sort of never-ending conversation with the community, where, to me, that's the important element, I guess, to go back to that, of having an art house theater. It's not just about the movies, although that is a big piece of it. It's about that the theater is run and owned by the community as a nonprofit community cinema. There is no person who is the private owner of the independent picture house. There is no corporation that just takes money from Charlotte citizens and it, just goes to another state. You know what I mean? And to me, that's really important, because then I think what happens is, and Brad can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel very strongly then that everyone who works for the cinema, whether it means slinging popcorn or whether it means the people who are sitting on the board trying to help develop and, raise funds and market and all that kind of stuff, they're doing it with a mindset of not like, how can I make myself a buck, or how can I, rise my stake in the community, but like, how can I create something for the people who I live in and amongst? And I think that's really important. And then sometimes we lose sight of that because businesses have to make money, right? And it's like, and that kind of rules all. And I think, but it's like, no, we're trying to figure out how can we create something that people in Charlotte feel ownership of? because again, they might have liked going to the Manor, or they might have liked going to Park Terrace, or they might like going to Stonecrest, but they don't feel ownership and feel like it's, and that's what all great local restaurants are like, or local bars or local pubs, or whatever. People feel like, oh, this is my home. This feels like home to me. This feels like a comfortable place where I belong, not where somebody's just taking my money. And I think that's the difference, right?
Well, and we're also very passionate. Yeah, I mean, studios, distributors these days, a lot of them just look to take the easy way out and, okay, I'm going to bring Sisu in and play, every theater that will take it. Where, like Jade mentioned earlier, we like to curate what we show, and we want to bring in films that we believe in, that we're passionate about, and we're going to spend marketing money on these films. It used to be back in the day, studios would, market the films, and you're seeing that more and more disappear. All they want to do is check the box that, we played 8 screens in Charlotte or something. And yeah, just the staff that we've created here, the board of directors. I mean, when we're looking at new board members, the first question we ask is, or inquire about is, are you passionate about cinema and film? Because it's important that they are, so they can go out in the community and talk about independent picture house.
So actually, this does lead me to another question. How do you go about curating, these movies? How do you choose, which films are going to show at the theater?
That's 100% Jay.
I like to say,
well, I mean, I'll interrupt real quick, and then I'll let you take over and run with it. But I mean, that's what we were doing in Toronto last week. I think I saw 39 films. I think Jay saw 38 or 39 films. We saw probably 4 or 5 of the same film, but I mean, he's got different tastes. I have different tastes, and we make a list. And now, some of them we know are going to open in October. Some are going to open over Thanksgiving, but we have this list now, and especially the ones that we enjoyed and again want to bring because we're passionate about them. We'll continue to monitor them. A film festival like Toronto, a lot of the films don't have distribution yet, so we're seeing world premieres of films that we know might not get released until next summer, next fall, even. So that's part of the process, and I'll let Jay run from here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think all I can really add to that is I just think it's, some of it is it's a fine line combination, and Brad can speak more to part of this than I can, of like, well, you got to keep the doors open, and you got to keep the lights on, and you got to pay the rent. So you need to think, what are people wanting to see? And again, that's where when you talk to your audience or your membership, and you get a sense of what and now we've been open over a year now, so we have a pretty good sense of what people like and what they kind of seem to be into. But there's also that element of like what Brad is talking about, is it's just, you have to have, as a programmer or a programming team, sort of people who kind of say, well, what about this? Because I think it's really good. And not me specifically. I mean, whoever that person is. Right. I mean, we just last week we just played. We're doing a series connected to the Anime Expo film series. So we're showing a bunch of anime films over the course of the next few months. We started in September and we'll go through to February, and it's classic sort of repertory anime stuff. And that's a huge blind spot in my, repertoire of what I like and what I'm into. I've just never really been into anime, but, we had one of our staff members, Allie Harris, who, was just like, there's a community of people in this city who want to see both new and classic anime. And so there's an advocacy from someone, and then you turn around and you work with that person and you go, okay, let's see, right? We have some space in the calendar. Let's get a sense and see if we can actually build this audience or have that audience. And we did, very well with the first film we had last week. So that was one of those things where I think it is just kind of a gut. Sometimes it's just a gut feeling where your brain is like, I think this is a good movie. And like Brad said, we see a lot of stuff at festivals. And if we can bring it in, maybe we have the ability to market and get some of our people to come see it. And maybe that over time helps build an audience for cinema that's not in the mainstream or easily accessible. But it is a fine line, right? Because again, you do also have to curate films that will make some money at the box office that people will come see. So you have to then ride that line. But again, I think ultimately there is is the last thing I'll say is there is a kind of core value that we have, I believe, and Brad, can tell me if I'm way off base here. There is a core value that we have in the independent picture house of like, we want to introduce people to new types of cinema, and it might just be like giving them a lot of it, right? Bringing them more documentaries because fewer and fewer documentaries get released into cinemas, and people again don't get to share them with their community, with their fellow Charlotteans. And so I think that is a core element of when you start talking about, well, like, how do you decide what to play? There is an element of like, is this playing anywhere? Why is it not playing anywhere? And again, do you feel good? And maybe this is a gut thing I do. Do you feel good that a movie of this quality or of this thematic value or social value has no footprint within a city the size of Charlotte, North Carolina? And that's where I sort of sometimes get to, where it's like, it is a real shame that this movie is this good and no one in Charlotte will see it. That just feels wrong, I think, to me and to most of us a lot of the time. And again, we only have 3 screens, so we can't show everything we would want to show. And nor would we, because, we do know that movies we see at Toronto, we love, and we're like, oh, I want to show this. And then our brain is like, who's going to come see this? How are we going to get people? How are we going to get people to come see this? To actually like keep the lights on. So it's a very delicate balance. And Brad and I, sometimes have, intense conversations when we're trying to navigate that fine line, because we have things, we're each passionate about, and we think, oh, I think the audience will like this, and I think the audience will like this, and we're like, okay, well, let's see. And right now, I think this will be the last thing I'll say. I do think even though we've been open for a year or more now, I still think we are still in a real learning curve of sort of like, how do we let people even know that we're showing these things? So if the numbers aren't great on a movie, is it because people didn't want to see the movie, or is it because people just didn't know we were playing the movie? Only our core audience knew. So there's that kind of fine line that we just, we always, but I think it's a gut as a programmer. I think it's just sort of like, you have to kind of have I think this is a good movie, and if I like it, there must be somebody else out there who's going to enjoy it too.
Yeah.
And Jay and I mean, we've said before we even open that our goal is that anyone can show up at the independent picture house and not know anything about any of the films we're showing, but know that they have the confidence in us that they'll buy a ticket to something. And I mean, it might be something that they don't go home and rave about, but at least know that it was worth seeing. So hopefully one day we'll get to that point.
Gotcha. I mean, it's been a common theme with this show, because a lot of the filmmakers that I've interviewed have all told me, yeah, I definitely want to I definitely want to make something that's gripping and that relates to people, but at the same time, they're tempered by the practicality of it, whether it's money or production or whatever. It's something that's universal in all aspects of film, whether you're making it or curating it. So I definitely get where you're coming from, and it actually hurts me a little bit to think that there are so many good films out there that will probably never get seen because of the fact that at the end of the day, you've got to figure out what's gonna, like you said, keep pay the rent, keep the lights on, all that stuff. Um, I mean, I really, really, really have so many questions. I really wish I had the time to talk to you guys for hours and hours. I really do enjoy talking to y'all, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So, so really, I've got two last questions here. The first one is, are you guys seeing as you guys started recently? Are you guys working with the local filmmaking community here in Charlotte, or have you had any events where you're inviting local filmmakers to come show their work at the picture house, or what?
Yeah, definitely. From my days at the manor, we would get phone calls weekly, if not daily, about people wanting to rent out the space. And we would always have to put them through to our corporate office, and knowing that if they were even lucky to get a phone call back, they were going to charge too much. And of all my time at the manor, I don't think we ever, well, maybe that's not true. One or two occasions where they actually rented out an auditorium to a local filmmaker. So that was one of my goals when we opened Independent Picture House, to provide affordable space where people can come and show their films. We've had countless film premieres from local filmmakers. We have people renting, just coming in and playing a DVD, their favorite movie. But yeah, we've been working with local filmmakers quite a bit. This month, September, and next month, October, gosh, I think we have between 20 and 25 rentals already on the books. So we're there's definitely a need out there, and I think especially word of mouth, local, the filmmaking scene in Charlotte, I think is everybody knows each other to a certain extent. And so we've had, again, on countless occasions, somebody comes to see a film premiere or a film they worked on, and love the venue, love the space, and turn right back around, and are renting out the auditorium for their film premiere. So I love working with local filmmakers. There's definitely a need out there, and yeah, it's been that's one of my favorite things about IPH since we've opened, is working in the community with local filmmakers.
And I'll just piggyback onto that, where that was, or reiterate, piggyback slash that was something that we when we went down this road to build out the Independent Picture House, we didn't want it to be just a place where we brought in movies that were, from other countries and some of the other indie and art house stuff. We really wanted to make sure that the local film community felt like it had a place that would work with them to help exhibit their work on some level. And one way that we do that actually is through, the Charlotte Film Festival, because again, while we're bringing movies from all over the world for the Charlotte Film Festival, which actually takes place September 27th through October 1st, so at the end of this month, there's lots of local filmmakers who we bring their movies in as part of the film festival, whether it's short films or whether it's feature films. I think this year we have three if you count a doc. We have 3 local produced feature films at the film festival this year. So, and that was part of it, is to showcase that there are incredible movies being made by independent filmmakers in this city and in this region that, again, sadly, much like an awesome Finnish movie that people will never get to see again with a community. And I think that's a big thing. Filmmakers, they make their shorts or they make their features, and maybe they get an opportunity to throw it on Tubi or Hulu or something, and or if they put it on a Vimeo page and people can they try to social media, come watch it. But it's a very different experience, as I've found working with the festival for many, many, many years now, where filmmakers say, like, this might be the only time where I actually got to sit in a movie theater, an actual cinema. It wasn't a pop-up screen in the back of an art gallery somewhere, and actually watch my movie with people, right? Like, and people I don't know, and that's a really powerful thing for a filmmaker, I think. And again, I think whether it's through the rentals or whether it's through the Charlotte Film Festival, I think we are really committed to creating that kind of opportunity for filmmakers. So yeah, it's hugely important, and I hope the film community knows that and understands that we want to work with them. We want to be the first place they think of when it's time to show their movie. We want them to get in touch with Brad and start talking. So,
and that leads me to the next to my next point. If people want to follow you or reach out to you, how can they do that?
They could visit our website. That gives everything that we're showing, everything that's been booked that's coming up. Also has a page for auditorium rentals, and that would be independentpicturehouse.org. And then also follow us on social media, which is IPHCLT. And I mean, yeah, and they'll have contact information, and I'm always checking emails and getting back to people. So I think that those are the two best routes.
Okay, and I like to ask all of my guests this: what's your favorite movie or TV show that you've seen that you feel is the best thing ever? And seeing as y'all recently returned from Toronto, were there any particular movies that stood out to you that you want to give a shout out to?
Where to start, right, Jay? Well, Jay and I had a great conversation walking to get the car last night. We saw Icelandic film. It's called Solitude, and it was 75 minutes, but it went in, did what it needed to do. It was very touching film, and after seeing some of these movies that are 2.5, 3 hours long, it's like, why can't every movie just not be bloated and just come in, do what you need to do, and get out? That's one that stood out for me.
Jay, any movies that stick out for you?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard just thinking about the festival. I mean, I loved Riddle of Fire, which was sort of a Goonies-esque kind of small little American film. I can't remember the director's name off the top of my head, but it was a small little, I think it's set in Colorado, and it was called Riddle of Fire, and it was basically kids need to get the ingredients to bake their mother a pie, so the mother will give them the password to their gaming system because they want to stay inside all day and play video games. And it ended up becoming this elaborate adventure to get the pie, right? And the ingredients for the pie. And it goes off, and there were a lot of weird, and it's an R-rated, kids on bikes, Goonies-esque type movie, but it was really fun, and I loved the aesthetic of it. So that was one, Riddle of Fire. I mean, Brad would agree with me on this, that Zone of Interest, the Jonathan Glazer film, is a masterpiece. It's a lot of gut punches and a lot of just uncomfortable feelings, but it's a brilliant film. So I mean, that was something, and one that I told Brad this too when we were talking about movies. I'm not the biggest Alexander Payne film fan, but The Holdovers I thought was, I mean, maybe his best movie since Election. I really liked it a lot. I thought it again, it wasn't bloated. It was long, but it wasn't bloated, and it had strong performances and looked really, the aesthetically, it was very interesting, the way he sort of made it look. And so those are three that kind of stand out. Oh, and then I will just say too, I saw a Norwegian documentary called Songs of Earth, which was a movie that a woman made about her father, who basically lives in this small northern Norwegian valley near one of the major glaciers in Norway, and basically just followed her father around for a year, walking around the climbing mountains and glaciers. And that movie was 90 minutes. Again, got in, got out, had 4 seasons of beautiful photography, and I thought was a really brilliant, just beautiful documentary about nature, about family, and so there's a couple that I'll throw in as well. So
yeah, and I got one more that's a must see. I saw it at Telluride. Actually, did not play Toronto, but Poor Things by Yorgos Lanthimos, the Greek director. And that was 2 hours and 20 minutes, which felt like it was 75 minutes, and I just did not want that movie to end. So that I believe is coming out mid to end of October. It's definitely on our list of must brings to
December.
the community. I'm sorry?
December is when that comes out.
December now?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, there you go. A live update.
Excellent. Well, Bradley, Jay, I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time to be on this podcast, and for all those watching, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this little interview. And please check out the Independent Picture House. Help these guys out. Help keep art house films alive here in Charlotte, because for God's sakes, we do need it so badly here. And for the Movie Pope, thank you so much for watching. Catch you on the flip side. Bye.